This last week, since the election, I don't know how much of you, of course, on social media and all of these things, we have people, there's the not my president campaign. We have, I've seen acts of intimidation and violence. I imagine that many of you have too. And here's the thing, it's been happening on both sides. I've seen people who were beaten because they were Trump supporters. We've seen people who were beaten because they were Hillary supporters. We've seen in our schools kids being handed out deportation notices from other kids. There have been acts of intimidation. And it's not just on one side. I want to be really clear. It's not just on one side. But I want to say to you on this day that in the year in which Donald Trump was elected president, I saw the Lord. I saw the Lord and was confronted, like Isaiah was, I am a man of unclean lips among a people of unclean lips. Because each and every one of us bear responsibility for each other. We belong to God, and we belong to each other. I don't know, and I have to admit, I don't know on my own when I hear stories from teachers at the school, because I met with the principal and at one of the schools who talked about how one of the kids in one of their classes were all of the kids in the class were worried about one of their friends because they were afraid that their friend was going to be deported, even though he was an American citizen. When I hear stories of swastikas getting painted on school properties in up in Maine, when I hear of stories of rage and bitterness that happens towards each other, I feel helpless. How about you? I mean, we ask ourselves, what in the world can we do? And what we are reminded of in this story is this simple thing. Holy, 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 God of power and might, heaven and earth are full of your glory. Hosanna in the highest. This central affirmation, this central vision that is at work here is a claim that Isaiah needed to hear back in the midst of all of the uncertainty of his time, that we need to hear right here, is that God is King of the world, King of our universe, that we are called not to look with fear at each other. In fact, the only person or entity that is to be feared is the one who appears in power and might, and that entity, that God is the God that the only reason that we should fear this God is because of the depths of the love that God has for us and for our creation. And God said to Isaiah, "Who shall go for me? Who will go out and bear my word?" And Isaiah, he does what virtually nobody else does. Here I am. Send me. Send me out into this world that is broken and that is filled with hate and that is filled with love and compassion and care for the people that are around us. We know that we live in a nation that is incredibly divided. This is the second time in my lifetime, and I know I'm younger than many of you here, but this is the second time in my lifetime in which the person who won the popular vote did not win the Electoral College. This is not me trying to say we need to get rid of the Electoral College. This is a reminder for us all that no matter how we voted, no matter how we look at this, no matter how we interpret the results of this election, the reality is that in this room, there are people who did not vote the same way that you did, and you still have to love them. In the time of fear, it is our job to love, because that is what Christ commands us. Today, Peter falls down at Jesus' feet after he catches so many fish, he can't believe it. And Jesus says, no longer are you going to go and catch fish, you are going to go catch people. And more than ever, not more than ever, this has always been our calling, this is always will be our calling, is that in the midst of pain and sorrow and brokenness, and the reality is, and fear, and there is real fear out there, and it is real. The only antidote to that is to look at those around you, those who you see face to face, and say, you are a child of God, and maybe it would be a good idea if I listened more than I spoke. Because the fear is on all sides. God still calls to us. God still comes to us. And God still asks this question: who will go for me? So I want you all to say it with me. Here I am. Send me. We are called. We are God's people. We will be the love that we have always been called to be. This is the good news. Amen.